I'm Amanda Walls, and this is SEO in 2024 Additional Insights.
Amanda, what's your additional insight for SEO in 2024?
So in 2024, I think in SEO, we should be focusing on user intent and building content authority and a website experience that matches that and helps people to get towards their goals.
Okay, so how do we go about focusing on user intent?
I think the first step in the user intent journey is to understand, firstly, what it is that our users are looking for, and secondly, how we actually answer the questions that they have. Doing that initial keyword research, understanding who is in the market, so that audience profiling, building those personas out, understanding what those touch points are, and then the type of information that they're looking for and how they want that presented to them. So, do they want it in an FAQ format? Do they want it in an image format? Do they want that answered, quickly towards the top of the page? Do they want more additional information? Do they want external resources? And looking at how long it's going to take them to actually, understand that information. So is it a very quick kind of time to conversion? Is it much longer time to conversion? So I think it's kind of taking all this information into account, doing that initial keyword research, understanding who the audience is, and then how, as a result of that, we actually go about on-site displaying that information in a way that's going to give them, I guess, the information that they need to answer their question, and then hopefully, from a business perspective, to go on and purchase a product or engage with our service.
And in terms of understanding who the audience is, you started off with keyword research. You mentioned a few other ways that you can actually determine that, including surveys. Is it always good to actually have a conversation with the audience, to have some kind of focus group, as well as actually relying on analytics from whatever digital analytics platform you're using?
So I think it's important to have a mixture of the two. So data is always key. And, fundamentally, from a business perspective, if we're looking to attract users who are looking for a particular service or product, we first need to know what they're searching for. So I think the keyword research does play a really important role of that, to understand, what from the data perspective is actually going to bring people to our website and what kinds of questions they're asking. But I would definitely think the focus groups play an important role. And, we work with a number of clients who conduct ongoing focus groups. And I think that's the other thing that I would say is, in the past, I think we conduct a focus group and then we find ourselves sort of 3 or 4 years later using that focus group data and assuming that audience persona and those people that are coming to our website are still the same, but they're not. They've changed. They've got different consumption habits. They've got different interests. They're looking at different things. They want to talk about different things. They want to engage in a different way. I think not only having the ability to access focus groups and to actually talk to the audience, but talking to them regularly, and not just talking to them in focus groups, asking for feedback. So a lot of the time that can be, running a test on the website where you kind of get a little pop-up and you ask people to feedback on, have you found what you're looking for today? Is there a problem? What is that problem to conversion? And I think having that ongoing conversation with them really helps you to understand your audience, but also it puts you ahead of any potential changes in consumer behaviors that they might have.
And with regards to focus groups, obviously you mentioned pop-ups there as well. But if you're going to have a conversation with a group of people, how do you determine who should be in that group and what kind of questions should you be asking?
So from a pop-up perspective, if you're doing it on the website, who will naturally fall into that group is the people that are on the website. So it will be whoever's kind of searched for your keywords in that particular respect. So I don't think you have a lot of kind of choice or control over who answers those specific questions. But I think if you're looking at the focus groups, particularly in terms of who we want to actually get in there, what I would normally do is we start very broad initially, because I think sometimes with data, we can be misled as to who our target audience is. And an example of this might be, we work with a watch client, and when we sort of look at the demographics as to a lot of the pages that get visited, we find that the men's watch pages are very popular. So I'd say maybe 70-30 over sort of women's watches. I think you could naturally assume off the back of that our demographic is male because they're searching for men's watches. But actually, when we go and do the audience research, we find that actually 75% of our demographic is female, and they are in fact looking for a watch to buy for someone. It might be for, partner, son, father, grandfather, etc., etc. So I think that when we're kind of looking at the focus groups, one of the first things that we would do is look at the analytics behind that. And that's not just looking at things like, the pages that people are landing on or what their content they're interacting with. Now, that's important, of course, because it helps us to get an understanding of how users are going through the website. But in terms of actually identifying that audience, there's a lot more touch points to that. And I think we have to bring together a lot of different data sources to ensure that we're not actually kind of targeting the wrong people.
That's great insight there. And I guess it also leads to identifying other keyword opportunities, such as gift type keywords.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's broadening out as well and understanding what the intent of that audience is. So not just who it is that's coming to our website, but what are they actually looking for? Because if I use that example again of the kind of watch retailer, you're always going to have people that are looking for, particular branded watches. You're always going to have people that are looking more generically for men's, for women's, for kids. But then there's the whole kind of occasion shopper. So in addition to your sort of gifts keywords, it's gifts for very specific occasions. It could be for, a specific wedding anniversary. It could be for like a Father's Day or a Mother's Day or Christmas, or, even we get people that are searching specifically for Black Friday because they know they're going to get a bargain on that day. So it's also, events within the shopping calendar as well that we can use that to target. So that kind of audience as well, I guess in that instance, you can combine a specific event with your audience targeting to make a much more targeted strategy.
And also in terms of that research phase, there are different categories of intent that the user has. So how do you prefer to categorize user intent?
Yeah, so I guess traditionally or in a standard way, we would look at the different aspects of the funnel. So your kind of top funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel, and understanding how engaged they are in the purchase journey. There's a number of different ways that we can look at that. The keywords give us a really good insight as to where they sort of sit within that. So if you have someone searching for, a specific brand of watch or more so a specific SKU number or a specific, part or model number, they're probably bottom of the funnel. So they're probably very, very close to converting. They've looked like they may have done their research elsewhere. Maybe, they've been into a shop and they've seen, I was guilty of this actually. I went on holiday recently and I had a bit of time to kill in the airport because my flight was 5 hours late, unfortunately. And I went into the sunglasses shop and I tried on a pair of sunglasses and I really liked them. And I felt so guilty afterwards because I took a picture of the model number. And then I went online and I found them £100 cheaper in a store and I bought them. But I was super engaged. I was right at the bottom of the funnel because I'd tried them on, I'd seen them, and, rightly or wrongly, I'd taken a picture of the model number and I'd searched for them. So I think, that's a big kind of chunk of the market in terms of bottom of the funnel. Medium funnel might be people searching for a specific brand, but not knowing, exactly which product they want or kind of when they want it. It could be people that are more sort of broadly searching. And I think top of the funnel from an audience perspective is the research phase. So it's people thinking, well, I might want to get, my friend a watch for their birthday, but I don't know what kind of watch to get. I'm going to have a look around. I'm going to see, what might suit them, see what the price points are. And I think from a user perspective that the importance for us, particularly from an SEO perspective, is to ensure that we're visible for the right long tail keywords. So understanding what they are from an audience perspective. So what are those kind of, I guess, points of conversion for the user? So is it price? Is it the color of the watch? Is it the size of the watch? Is it, the style of the watch? And making sure that we've got, content and a strategy that targets all of that as well.
I love your tip about optimizing for your SKU number because thinking about it, I've done that in the past. I've wanted a particular item. I've found the product ID or the SKU number and searched for that, and probably found the cheaper option by doing that. Is that something that most SEOs are actively doing, or is that a missed opportunity on many websites, do you think?
I think it's a big missed opportunity. I think the SKU optimization is often overlooked, but I also think one of the reasons that maybe it's overlooked is because when you start trying to optimize at SKU level, it becomes quite a big project. So you first got to do your kind of prioritization of which SKUs do we, look at first, and then you've really got to optimize those product pages. And a lot of the times you find that, for good reason, those product pages have quite generic copy, normally because there's about 10,000 of them. And no one really has enough time in their day to kind of write anything unique for that. So you'll often find like a manufacturer description or that type of thing. And I think when you start optimizing at SKU level and you start generating that unique content, it can become quite a time-consuming task. And also because those SKUs will have a traditionally, let's say, lower search volume than something more broad, like let's say a Michael Kors watch or, a Seconda watch or any kind of brand, that I think they kind of get overlooked because they're overlooked in favor of a high search volume. But at the end of the day, if someone's searching for Michael Kors watch, they might have a 2% chance of converting, whereas if someone's searching for a SKU, they've probably got a 40% chance of converting because that's basically what they want. The only thing I think then that's going to hold them back is either price or review, if the website's got a bad review, let's say. But if you're competitive on price and you've got good reviews, there's no reason why they wouldn't go on and purchase that. So I think even though the search volume is a lot lower for that, it's a much bigger area of opportunity because you've probably got lower competition because not as many people are doing it, but also the user is more likely to convert.
So it's easy to set a goal for bottom of funnel. Obviously, that's purchase when it comes to e-commerce. But what about earlier on when they're just browsing your website? How do you set a goal for that? And how do you actually encourage the user to come back when they're ready to buy?
It's definitely a lot more difficult, especially when you're talking to stakeholders about it, I think, because obviously the purchase and the money is the ultimate goal, right? For middle of the funnel, for us, we'll look at things like on-site engagement. So that's, how much time they spent looking at a particular product, at a particular category. We'll look at metrics like how many pages or how much time they spent actually going through the website. Because if we're targeting more of like a browsing traffic, let's say someone looking for, a particular gift or a particular product, we'll kind of measure that. So we'll have a look at how engaged they are in that particular area of it. And then what we'll do is obviously we'll take that information and we'll build it into remarketing lists. We can do remarketing for things like basket abandoners. You tend to find that a lot of the middle funnel tend to be a basket abandoner because they're not as engaged as the bottom of the, bottom of the funnel. They're super engaged. They know what they want. Chances are they've probably already decided they want to buy it. It's just a case of where. Whereas middle of the funnel, I think they're not 100% sure what they want. And they're also maybe not 100% sure that they want to buy it or that they want to buy it at that point in time. So we find them to be kind of the highest level of basket abandoners. I guess another way that we would approach remarketing or getting them back to the website to answer that question is building lists out of basket abandoners and retargeting. That might be through, like a paid search channel maybe, or just adjusting our SEO strategy to kind of pull them back into the funnel. But I think a lot of that is data collection. So it's understanding again, data collection and prioritization, let's say. What are people searching for? What's trending as well? So what's topical, and making sure that we're optimizing pages that are likely to trend or likely to be popular, and then building a strategy around that.
Yeah, brilliant. So obviously if an SEO is not working closely with a paid search team, they need to be working more closely, doing things like remarketing, like you mentioned there as well. Is there anything that you do from an organic perspective, maybe from a brand perspective, to get that person to remember you? So hopefully you're the brand that they will come back to in the future.
So I think there's a number of things that we can do on site, I guess, from an organic perspective. I often offer related products. So I often encourage our clients to kind of set up a related products. And what that means is that, so say someone comes onto the website and they are a browsing user, like a top or middle of funnel user. They go onto a product, they haven't quite liked it. They then leave the website and go to another one. Rather than getting them to leave the website, we'll always try and keep them on the website for as long as we can. And that might be saying, well, actually, you know what? You weren't a big fan of this, but we know that you're a browser, so you weren't that high intent anyway. Here's some other options. Here's something similar. So based on your kind of preferences or what you've searched for, which might be, I don't know, a watch with a rectangular face, let's say. Here's some other watches with a rectangular face. And there's actually a number of programs out there that you can use on your website that will understand what that user intent was that brought the user in the first place and will actually dynamically show related either searches or, related products in relation to that. So I think from an SEO perspective, that plays an important role in tackling that kind of, top and middle of funnel by saying to them, well, don't leave us, spend a bit more time getting to know the brand, spend a bit more time learning about us and the product range we have available. And here's another 6 rectangular watch faces that you might not have considered, but you might like one of these.
Do you ever try to publish different web pages targeting the same keyword phrases to attract different user intent, or is that just diluting your potential success on the SERP?
So I wouldn't necessarily do that from an SEO perspective. I think from a paid perspective, that's a different conversation. And definitely I think the A/B testing is there. But I think if you have too many pages that are too closely linked or too semantically linked, I think that can actually it can detract, because Google will look at those pages and we're thinking about this now from a pure SEO perspective. Google will look at those pages. It probably won't understand which one to rank for a particular search term because it's probably not thinking too much about the user intent at that time. It's thinking about answering the question. And I think if both of those pages answer the question, even equally as well as each other, then it's not going to know which one to return. And I think it's going to hold us back in the search results. Despite the fact that maybe it does match the user intent a little bit better, it's not going to be there in the first place to match it. So it's not something that we would necessarily recommend. Once we've got users on the website, we could then A/B test serving different dynamic content or dynamic products, to kind of see what matches their user intent, and we can adapt the website to that, again, using, the sort of various different tools to do that. But I think at the initial stage, so at the initial acquisition stage, it would be a little bit risky from an SEO perspective to try that.
Got you. Okay. So you need to make sure that search engines just see one piece of content, and you're maybe using JavaScript or some other technology to dynamically serve a different piece of content just to make sure that you're optimizing, hopefully, that visitor retention.
Once they're on the website, yeah. So once they're on the website, I think we can nurture that path through the website a little bit better. But I think at the initial point of content, when we're answering that initial question, we want to have one really clear piece of content, one really clear page that answers that. So if someone's looking for a particular type of watch, we know exactly where we're going to send them. And then once they're on the website, if they have searched for, let's say a rectangular watch face, we can then say, oh, hey, have you seen these other products? Or, hey, maybe you would prefer this, or maybe you would prefer that. But we've got them at that point. And then we can kind of push the user intent side.
So you've shared what SEO should be doing in 2024. Now let's talk about what SEO shouldn't be doing. So what's something that's seductive in terms of time, but ultimately counterproductive? What's something that SEO shouldn't be doing in 2024?
So I think to kind of tie on for this point around the importance of user intent, what I think people shouldn't be doing is looking at other SEO techniques that don't work in kind of together with user intent. So one example of this would be a link building. Now, digital PR is something that we do. It's something that we champion. And I think when done correctly, it's an incredibly important part of an SEO, campaign or an SEO strategy. But I think at the minute, in some instances, people are very focused on building links for the sake of building links. Links will bring me traffic, links will bring me performance, links will improve my keyword rankings. But we're forgetting fundamentally what Google wants us to do or what Google is there for, and it's there to answer a question. And if we're not answering that question, and if we're not providing content and a good user experience and, an on-site experience that actually gets users to where they need to be and answers that question for them, then we could kind of have all the links in the world, but we're still not going to have the relevancy to return for that search result. So I think really from an SEO perspective, we need to be focusing on getting all of these things to work together rather than, potentially over prioritizing an area without giving it the support it needs from another.
Amanda Walls is director at Cedarwood Digital. You can find her over at cedarwood.digital. Amanda, thanks so much for adding your additional insight to SEO in 2024.
Thank you.
I've been your host, David Bain. You've been listening to an episode of SEO in 2024 Additional Insights, a Majestic series that complements the original SEO in 2024 podcast, video series and book. Find out more at SEOin2024.com.